Ja, folkens, det er mandag 16. april. Klokka er 3:30. Det er grunnen til at det er litt mørkt, så jeg håper dere ser noe i det hele tatt. Jeg har stått opp klokka 3. Jeg skal til København for å spille Detroit Become Human. Flyet mitt går klokka 6. Jeg tar den aller første flybussen som går.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you so
much. To make your audio acquaintance.
And so to you. Thank you so much for taking your time to do this interview over the phone. Okay, so as this is a game based on androids, I of course need to ask the questions. Do androids dream of electric sheep?
So there are some magazines in the game, and there's a magazine in the game that imagines an AI has written a novel that's the first bestseller written by an AI. And the title of that book is Do Humans Dream of Mammalian Sheep? Which is in a way a deeper question, right?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the future and the world that you have created in the game? What kind of possibilities and problems are present in this world where androids have such a significant place in society?
Yeah, so the world of Detroit is set in 2038, for the near future. And it's a society that we wanted to be very reminiscent of the society we live in today, one that would remind us of the society we live in today. So it's a divided society in that some people have benefited from androids and become very rich, whereas others have been left unemployed and without a way of contributing to society. So it's a very divided world, and into that division, some androids have begun to experience emotion and desire freedom, and these androids are called deviants. And those deviants, of course, represent a global problem, because if androids are going to start disobeying, then the machines that are fully integrated into the economy and every area of life are now a danger to us. And I think there's a resonance there, not just with divided societies, but also with AI being on the horizon.
There are a lot of theories today about the possibilities of AI eventually taking over the world. Did some of these theories affect the writing of the story? Do you have these theories kind of in the back of your head while writing this?
Well, the beauty of... So Detroit is what we call an interactive drama. And what we mean by that is that your choices as a player dramatically change the outcome of the story. Dramatically. So when we were thinking about things like, will AI be a good thing or a bad thing? Our job as writers, in my view, was to ask interesting questions and let the player answer them for themselves. So we don't know whether AI will be a good thing or a bad thing. And you know, you referred to these studies. The most striking thing, I think, about AI is how nobody really knows what it's going to be like, and how even the experts disagree on whether it will be a good thing or a bad thing. But we didn't need to answer that question as writers. Our job was to let the player answer those questions in writing his own story through the choices he makes.
You were assigned a case early this evening. A homicide involving a CyberLife android. In accordance with procedure, the company has allocated a specialized model to assist investigators.
Well, I don't need any assistance. Especially not from a plastic asshole like you. Just be a good little robot and get the fuck out of here.
So the player choices are very significant in this story. How much does the choices affect the story and the length of the game? How do you create a story that is equally entertaining for everyone, even though people's choices might be very different?
I mean, that's a great question. So I'm often asked what the biggest challenge is writing an interactive drama. For me, what you've just said is the biggest challenge. It's making sure that every version of the story is equally satisfying. So managing the cases is one thing, but making every version of the story equally thought-provoking and moving is the real challenge. And honestly, there's no easy answer to that question. It's just a question of thinking very deeply about what the game's about. But I think it's also ensuring that any ending the player gets, or any story the player gets, is truly a reflection of their choices. That there's a very fair connection between choices and consequences. Because that story is going to be meaningful to you because it is your story, because it is the story you created through the choices you made. In terms of how variable it is, we know that there are more than 1,000 combinations of Act 3, which is the final stretch of the game, the kind of final portion of the game, because we can't end all the stories at the same time. There's so many going on at once. There's this kind of ending block. We know there's over 1,000 combinations of that, but we also know that you can lose any, or indeed all, of your playable characters before the end of the story. And so in that sense, the game can end before the end. There are more endings than there are endings. So it's very difficult to answer how many, an awful lot. And then in terms of length, Detroit is a bit unlike the previous Quantic games in that it's the most gamey game we've ever done. The player is in control much more often. He plays in open gameplay a lot. There's fewer cutscenes. The story develops through action more often. Now what that means is, in addition to the story being bending, in addition to the story listening to your choices, how long scenes take and how they unfold is much more in your control as a player. So the first scene of the game is called The Hostage. Now you arrive and an android has taken a human girl hostage out on the balcony of a terrace apartment. People playing it today, some people spend 40 minutes investigating the room, the house, to find out what happened, why is the hostage taker so upset, blah, blah, blah. Other people walk straight out onto the balcony within 2 minutes. So in that sense, the length's highly variable. Also in the sense that there are entire scenes you can miss. Not just if a playable character dies, but even just through the decisions you make. There's a scene today called The Interrogation, where Connor, the android detective, interrogates a deviant, a misbehaving machine. That's a long scene if you get it, but if you didn't catch the android in the previous investigation, then you don't have him in custody to interrogate, so you miss the scene. So really, it's very difficult to answer the question of length. It varies hugely depending on the story you choose to tell with your choices.
You look lost.
We have nowhere to go.
I know someone who can help you.
But that's on the other side of town. We need a place for tonight.
Quantic Dream has already had a lot of experience with story games featuring player choices. What have you learned from like Heavy Rain and beyond that you've brought with you into Detroit?
David Cage's vision for Detroit is that it would be the most interactive experience the company has ever made. And that had a story dimension and it had a gameplay dimension. So from the story point of view, it meant really having a huge array of versions of the story, so every player can create their own. It meant making sure that the game listens to the choices you make. So your choices do matter. Every choice matters. You'd have seen today, if you've been here, at the end of every scene, we display a screen called the flow chart. And that shows which ending you got, how many other endings there were, and how the choices you made led to the ending that you got. And that's about being transparent with players to show them that their choices really do matter and what the connection is between the choices and the consequences they get. And then in terms of gameplay, it meant putting the character in control more often, allowing him to be in free roam more often, letting him tell the story through his actions rather than through cutscenes. So I think that was the ambition coming out of Beyond and Heavy Rain, was to say, okay, what would the next phase of interactive drama be? What's the next big thing in interactive drama? It's probably the most interactive one ever made. It's one where the player is truly at the center of their experience, and there's no illusion about how bending the game really is.
This kind of flowchart you're talking about reminds me of the ones you see in other games that are focused on player choices, like the Telltale games and Life is Strange. What is it that makes Detroit unique compared to these kinds of games?
Well, the flowchart in Detroit is quite different in that the flowchart jumps up at the end of every scene, and instead of just showing a few key choices, it shows your entire path through the scene from the beginning to the end. It shows all the forks in the road and which fork you took. And it also has a checkpoint feature which allows you to jump back to a decision and explore a different branch. Play with explore a different outcome by making a different decision. So I think it's really a lot more in-depth and puts the player at the center of the experience more than we've seen in previous games.
Let's see if you have any talent. Give it a try. Try painting something.
Paint? What would I... Painting what?
Anything you want. Give it a try.